The cargo bay of the merchant vessel Prosperity's edge reeked of alien sweat, fear, and something else Marcus Chen couldn't quite identify. Death, maybe. He pressed his back against the cold metal bulkhead and tried to make himself invisible as the Kethvar guards dragged another prisoner past his hiding spot. Marcus had been delivering medical supplies to the Outer Rim colonies when pirates attacked his ship. Not just any pirates, but Kethvar slavers. The reptilian humanoids were known throughout the galaxy for their cruelty and their insatiable appetite for gladiatorial combat. Now he found himself crammed into a slave transport with dozens of other captured beings, all destined for the fighting pits of Kethvar Prime. The ship lurched as it dropped out of hyperspace, and Marcus heard the distinctive sound of docking clamps engaging with another vessel. Through the small porthole near his position, he caught a glimpse of their destination, a massive space station that looked like a twisted cathedral made of black metal and pulsing red energy conduits. The infamous Bloodspire Arena. Fresh meat for the pits, roared one of the guards, a massive Kethvar whose scaled hide bore the ritual scars of a veteran warrior. You will fight, you will bleed, and, if you were strong enough, you might live to see another day. The prisoners were herded through a series of corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. The walls were lined with trophies from previous gladiators, weapons, armor pieces, and, worse things that Marcus tried not to look at too closely. Holographic displays showed highlights from recent fights, alien warriors tearing each other apart while crowds cheered for blood. They were sorted into groups based on size and apparent fighting ability. Marcus, being human and relatively small compared to most of the other prisoners, was placed with what the guards clearly considered the cannon fodder group. These were the fighters expected to die quickly and provide entertainment for the crowd before the main events. The holding cells were cramped and filthy. Marcus found himself sharing a space barely large enough for four beings with a crystalline creature that looked like living gemstone, a fur-covered humanoid with too many arms, and something that might have been a plant if plants could walk and had tentacles for faces. First time in the pits, asked a voice from the corner of the cell. Marcus turned to see another humanoid figure, this one roughly his size but clearly not human. The being had pale blue skin, elongated limbs, and large dark eyes that seemed to hold centuries of sadness. Yeah, Marcus replied, sitting down on the hard bench that served as both seat and bed. You? The alien made a sound that might have been laughter if laughter could be bitter and hollow. My name is Vextai. I have fought in these pits for 3 cycles. I have seen warriors from 100 worlds die for the entertainment of the Kethvar nobility. 3 years? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the cell. How are you still alive? Vextai's large eyes focused on him with something that might have been curiosity. I am fast. I am clever. And I have learned that in the arena, it is not always the strongest who survives, but the one willing to do whatever it takes to live another day. He paused, studying Marcus more carefully. What species are you? I have not encountered your kind before. Human. From Earth. Marcus wasn't sure why he was being so forthcoming, but something about Vextai seemed trustworthy despite their circumstances. Human, Vextai repeated slowly, as if testing the word. I have heard whispers of your people. You are new to the galactic community, yes? Recently discovered faster than light travel? About 50 years ago, yeah. We're still pretty much the new kids on the block. Vextai nodded thoughtfully. That explains why you are here. The Kethvar have a tradition of testing new species in their arenas. They like to see how different beings fight, what makes them strong or weak. Your people's data will be valuable to them. The implications of that statement hit Marcus like a physical blow. He wasn't just fighting for his own life, he was potentially representing all of humanity. Whatever the Kethvar learned about human capabilities in their arena could influence how they dealt with Earth and its colonies in the future. Before he could dwell on this too long, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights bathed the corridors in pulsing red, and they could hear the sound of running footsteps and shouted orders in the Kethvar language. What's happening? Asked the crystalline being, its voice like wind chimes in a storm. Vextai was already at the cell door, peering through the small window. Rebellion, he said grimly. It happens sometimes. A group of gladiators decide they would rather die fighting their captors than in the arena for entertainment. The sounds of battle grew closer, the distinctive whine of energy weapons, the clang of metal on metal, and the screams of the wounded and dying. Marcus found himself gripping the metal bench so hard his knuckles went white. They will not succeed, Vextai continued, still watching through the window. They never do. The Kethvar have too many advantages: better weapons, control of the station's systems, superior numbers. But their rebellion will serve to remind the rest of us what happens to those who resist. As if summoned by his words, a group of Kethvar guards appeared in the corridor outside their cell, dragging something behind them. Marcus's stomach turned as he realized it was a wounded gladiator, leaving a trail of bright purple blood on the metal floor. The guards threw the wounded fighter into the cell opposite theirs and locked the door. Through the transparent aluminum barrier, Marcus could see it was another humanoid, this one nearly 7 feet tall with 4 arms and skin that looked like it was made of living metal. One of those arms hung at an impossible angle, clearly broken, and purple blood flowed freely from multiple wounds. Zektar, whispered Vextai, and Marcus heard something like respect in his voice. He was champion of his world before the Kethvar conquered it. One of the finest warriors I have ever seen fight. The wounded gladiator, Zektar, was trying to apply pressure to a particularly bad wound on his side, but, with one arm broken and the others needed to keep him upright, he was fighting a losing battle against blood loss. Marcus watched in horror as the purple blood continued to flow, forming an ever-widening pool on the cell floor. He's going to bleed out, Marcus said, more to himself than to anyone else. Yes, Vextai replied matter-of-factly. The Kethvar will not waste medical supplies on a failed rebel. They will let him die as an example to the rest of us. Marcus found himself standing up, though he couldn't remember deciding to do so. He was staring at Zektar, watching the life slowly drain out of a being who had probably been fighting for freedom, who had chosen to risk everything rather than remain a slave. There has to be something we can do, Marcus said. The crystalline being made a sound like breaking glass. The Kethvar have sealed the cells. Even if we could reach him, we have no medical supplies, no way to help. But Marcus was already examining the cell door, running his hands along its edges, looking for any weakness or flaw. The door was solid, the lock electronic and sophisticated. There was no way to break it open, no way to. Wait. The food slot. It was small, barely large enough to pass a meal tray through, but it was the only opening in the otherwise sealed barrier between their cells. Vextai, Marcus said suddenly, what do you know about Zektar's physiology? His blood type, compatibility with other species? Vextai looked at him strangely. His people, the Korthani, have universal blood compatibility within their genetic family group. Their blood can accept certain types of foreign proteins without rejection, an evolution from their world's harsh environment where they sometimes had to substitute nutrients from other creatures to survive. Why do you ask? Marcus was already rolling up his sleeve. Because humans have different blood types, and some of us are universal donors. If his physiology can accept foreign blood proteins, maybe I can help. You cannot be serious, said the fur-covered being, all 4 of its arms gesturing frantically. Even if you could somehow get your blood to him, the Kethvar will punish any attempt to help a rebel. They might throw you directly to the arena beasts without even the chance to fight. Marcus looked across the corridor at Zektar, who was now lying on his side, his breathing becoming increasingly labored. The warrior's metallic skin had taken on a dull, grayish hue, and his movements were becoming weaker. Maybe, Marcus said, using his teeth to tear a strip of fabric from his shirt. But I can't just watch him die when there might be something I can do to help. He wrapped the fabric around his left forearm, then used the sharp edge of his belt buckle to make a small incision in his arm. Blood welled up immediately, bright red against his pale skin. He positioned his arm over the food slot and let the blood drip into a small container that had been left behind from their last meal. Human, Vextai said urgently, you are risking your life for someone you do not even know. This is not logical behavior. Marcus looked at him with a slight smile. You're right, it's not logical. But sometimes the right thing to do isn't the logical thing to do. When he had collected enough blood, Marcus carefully angled the container through the food slot and called out softly to Zektar. "Hey! Can you hear me?" The wounded warrior's eyes opened slowly, focusing on Marcus with obvious difficulty. Up close, Marcus could see that Zektar's eyes were a deep amber color, and, despite his pain, there was an intelligence there that spoke of a proud and noble spirit. "Human blood," Marcus said, holding up the container so Zektar could see it. "My species has universal donors. If your physiology can handle it, this might help with the blood loss." Zektar stared at him for a long moment, and Marcus wondered if the alien understood what he was offering. Then, slowly and with obvious pain, Zektar dragged himself closer to the food slot. "Why?" Zektar's voice was weak but clear, and Marcus was surprised to hear that he spoke perfect Standard Galactic. "Because it's the right thing to do," Marcus replied simply. Zektar's amber eyes studied Marcus's face as if searching for deception or ulterior motive. Finding neither, he carefully took the container and drank its contents without hesitation. Marcus immediately began collecting more blood, ignoring the growing weakness in his own arm. "That is enough," Zektar said after the third container. "More will weaken you too much, and you will need your strength for what is to come." Marcus was about to argue when Zektar suddenly went very still, his eyes widening in what looked like shock or fear. "What is wrong?" Vextai asked, having been watching the entire exchange with fascination. Zektar was staring at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. When he spoke, his voice carried a tone of awe and something that might have been reverence. "Your blood," Zektar said slowly, "it carries markers I have not felt since I was a child on my homeworld. Ancient markers, older than the Kethvar Empire, older than most of the current galactic civilizations." "I don't understand," Marcus said, though he was beginning to feel a strange tingling sensation where his blood had made contact with the air. Zektar struggled to sit up, his wounds still bleeding but his movements already stronger than they had been moments before. "My people have legends, stories passed down from our ancestors about a time before the Great Forgetting, when the galaxy was young and powerful beings walked among the stars." He paused, his amber eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "We called them the firstborn, the original children of the cosmos. The legends say that they seeded life throughout the galaxy, that all sentient species carry traces of their genetic legacy. But only one species would carry the pure line, the direct inheritance of their power." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "And you think humans?" "I do not think," Zektar interrupted, his voice growing stronger. "I know. Your blood sings with the old power, human. It awakens something in mind that has slept for generations. You are not just any species new to the galaxy. You are the inheritors." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, alarms began blaring again, but this time they were different. Instead of the harsh warning tones from before, these were ceremonial chimes that echoed through the station with an almost musical quality. "The blood rite," whispered Vextai, and, for the first time since Marcus had met him, the alien sounded genuinely afraid. "Someone has invoked the ancient blood rite." "What's the blood rite?" Marcus asked, but, even as the words left his mouth, he had a sinking feeling that he already knew the answer. Zektar was now standing, his wounds visibly healing at a rate that should have been impossible. The metallic sheen was returning to his skin, and, when he looked at Marcus, there was something new in his amber eyes, loyalty, gratitude, and something that looked almost like worship. When one being freely gives their life's blood to save another, especially in a place of death like this arena, ancient laws are invoked, Zektar explained. "Laws older than the Kethvar Empire, older than most current governments. The blood rite creates a debt that must be honored, a bond that cannot be broken." The ceremonial chimes were joined by the sound of marching feet, but these were not the heavy boots of Kethvar guards. These footsteps had a rhythm and purpose that spoke of discipline and honor. "The Covenant Guard," Zektar said, and now Marcus could hear satisfaction in his voice. "The Kethvar may rule this sector of space, but even they dare not ignore the old laws when the blood rite is properly invoked." Marcus was beginning to understand that his simple act of compassion had set something in motion that was far bigger than he had anticipated. Through the small window in their cell door, he could see figures approaching in the corridor, tall, imposing beings in ornate armor that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. What happens now? Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Zektar turned to face him fully, and, when he spoke, he dropped to one knee in a gesture of profound respect. Now, Marcus of the humans, you will learn what it truly means to be the inheritor of the firstborn. The galaxy has waited 10,000 years for your people to take their place among the stars. The cell door suddenly opened with a soft hiss, operated not by HFY technology but by something far more advanced. The Covenant Guard had arrived, and Marcus could see that despite their imposing presence, they were bowing to him. The blood debt is acknowledged, said the lead guard, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The inheritor will be honored according to the ancient ways. As Marcus stepped out of the cell, still not fully understanding what was happening to him, he caught sight of the HFY station commander through a nearby window. The reptilian overlord was watching the proceedings with obvious fury, but he made no move to interfere. Whatever Marcus had started by giving his blood to save Zektar, it was clear that it was only the beginning. The tingling sensation in his blood was growing stronger, and he could feel something awakening within him, something that had been dormant in humanity for countless generations. The galaxy was about to discover why the firstborn had chosen humans as their inheritors, and why sometimes the greatest power comes not from strength or cunning, but from the simple act of caring enough to help a stranger in need. As they walked through the corridors of the Bloodspire Arena, now accompanied by an honor guard of ancient warriors and, with a fully healed Zektar at his side, Marcus began to understand that his life as a simple cargo hauler was over. What came next would determine not just his own fate, but the future of humanity among the stars. The Covenant Guard escorted Marcus through sections of the Bloodspire Arena that clearly weren't meant for prisoners or even paying spectators. These corridors were older, built from materials that seemed to absorb and reflect light in impossible ways. The walls were covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they contained meanings too complex for the human mind to fully process. Marcus walked in a daze, still trying to understand how giving blood to help an injured warrior had led to this moment. Behind him, Zektar moved with fluid grace, his wounds completely healed and his forearms carrying weapons that the Covenant Guard had returned to him. The metallic sheen of his skin now seemed to pulse with an inner light that matched the energy flowing through the ancient symbols on the walls. "Where are you taking me?" Marcus asked the lead guard, a being whose armor made it impossible to determine what species lay beneath. To the Sanctum of Records, came the reply, the voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. "All blood debts must be properly registered, and yours carries implications that have not been seen for millennia." They passed through a massive archway into a chamber that took Marcus's breath away. The sanctum was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows high above, and every surface was covered with what could only be described as living data. Streams of light flowed through crystalline matrices, and floating holographic displays showed information in dozens of alien languages. At the center of the chamber stood a figure that was clearly ancient and powerful. It was humanoid in general shape but seemed to be composed of the same flowing light that decorated the walls. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "So," the entity said, "humanity finally produces an inheritor. We have been waiting a very long time for this moment." Marcus felt Zektar tense beside him, and he realized that even the proud Korthani warrior was intimidated by this being. "I still don't understand what any of this means," Marcus said, surprised by how steady his own voice sounded. The entity moved closer, and Marcus could see that what he had taken for flowing light was actually composed of countless tiny symbols, each one more complex than human writing could ever be. 10,000 years ago, the entity began, when the galaxy was young and most of the current civilizations had not yet learned to make fire. There existed a race known as the Firstborn. They were the first to achieve true understanding of the fundamental forces that bind the universe together. Holographic displays around them began showing images, star systems being born, planets being shaped and seeded with life, vast ships traveling between galaxies. The Firstborn knew that their time was ending, the entity continued. They had grown beyond physical existence and were ready to transcend to higher dimensions. But they also knew that the galaxy would need guardians, beings capable of maintaining the balance they had established. Marcus watched in fascination as the displays showed the Firstborn working on countless worlds, carefully modifying the genetic structure of developing life forms. They seeded dozens of species with fragments of their essence, their knowledge, their power. But only one species would carry the complete inheritance, the full genetic legacy that would allow them to truly take the place of the firstborn when the time came. The displays now showed Earth, but not the Earth Marcus knew. This was a younger world, still cooling from its formation, and he watched as beings of pure energy descended from the stars to work their ancient magic on the primordial soup that would eventually become life. Humanity was their chosen successor, Marcus said, the understanding hitting him like a physical blow. Not humanity as it exists now, the entity corrected. Humanity as it could become. The genetic markers were placed dormant, waiting for the right circumstances to awaken them. The markers that respond to one simple catalyst, the willing sacrifice of one's life essence for another being. Zektar stepped forward, his amber eyes glowing with an inner fire. "This is why your blood could heal me so completely," he said. "This is why the ancient protocols recognized your sacrifice and triggered the blood rite." Marcus looked down at his arm where he had made the cut to help Zektar. The wound was completely healed, without even a scar to show where it had been. More than that, he could feel something flowing through his veins, a warmth and energy that hadn't been there before. "What happens now?" he asked. The entity gestured, and the holographic displays changed to show the current state of the galaxy. Marcus could see the Kethvar Empire, a red cancer spreading across dozens of star systems. He could see other powers, the crystalline hierarchy, the machine intelligence of the Nexus, the hive minds of the Swarm Collective. "Now," the entity said, "you must choose. The awakening of the firstborn inheritance is not automatic. It requires conscious acceptance of the responsibility that comes with such power." "What responsibility?" "To become what the firstborn were, guardians of balance, protectors of life, arbiters of justice when justice cannot be found elsewhere." The entity's form seemed to intensify. "It is not a burden to accept lightly. The power of the firstborn can reshape worlds, extend life across eons, bend the fundamental forces of reality to your will. But it also means that you will be responsible for the consequences of that power." Marcus thought about his life before all this, hauling cargo between colonies, making enough money to keep his ship running and put food on the table. It had been a simple life, but it had been his life. What was being offered now was something beyond his comprehension. "And if I refuse?" he asked. Then, the genetic markers return to dormancy, and the galaxy continues as it has for the past 10,000 years. The strong prey on the weak, empires rise and fall through conquest and brutality, and species like yours struggle to find their place among civilizations that have had millennia to establish their power. Through the chamber's transparent walls, Marcus could see the Blood Spire arena continuing its grisly entertainment. Somewhere out there, beings were fighting and dying for the amusement of their captors. On countless worlds throughout the galaxy, the same story was being repeated, the powerful oppressing the weak, the innocent suffering while those who could help turned away. "If I accept," Marcus said slowly, "what would that mean for humanity? For Earth? It would mean that humanity would take its rightful place as one of the galaxy's guardian species. Earth would become a protected world, your people would have access to technologies and knowledge that would advance your civilization by thousands of years. But it would also mean that other species would expect you to live up to the legacy of the firstborn." Zektar moved closer to Marcus, his forearms spread in a gesture of respect. "I have seen what you are capable of," he said. "Not just the power in your blood, but the character that led you to help a stranger when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. If all humans carry even a fraction of that nobility, then the galaxy will be fortunate to have you as guardians." Marcus looked around the ancient chamber, at the flowing data that represented knowledge accumulated over millions of years, at the entity that had waited 10 millennia for this moment, at Zektar whose life he had saved with a simple act of compassion. "If I accept," he said, "I won't be doing it alone, will I? The blood debt ensures that I am bound to your service for as long as you have need of me," Zektar replied. "But, more than that, I believe in what you represent. I choose to follow you not because of ancient laws, but because I have seen the content of your character." The entity stepped back, creating space around Marcus. "The choice must be made freely, without coercion. But choose quickly. The Kethvar are not patient beings, and they will not allow this ceremony to continue indefinitely. As if summoned by those words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. These were not ceremonial chimes but harsh warnings of immediate danger. Through the transparent walls, Marcus could see Kethvar warships moving into position around the arena station. "They mean to attack the sanctum," one of the Covenant Guard reported. The Kethvar commander believes that if he can kill the Inheritor before the awakening is complete, the ancient laws will not apply to him. "Can they do that?" Marcus asked. "They can try," the entity replied with something that might have been amusement. "But the sanctum has defenses that predate their empire by millions of years. Still, their attack will endanger innocent life throughout the station. Thousands of prisoners, workers, even some of their own people will die if this escalates to full warfare." Marcus felt the weight of decision pressing down on him. People were going to die because of what he had started. Innocent beings would suffer because he had chosen to help Zektar instead of looking the other way. But then, he remembered something his father had told him years ago, back on Earth when Marcus was just a boy struggling with a bully at school. "The moment you see suffering and choose to do nothing about it, you become part of the problem. But the moment you choose to act, even when it's dangerous or difficult, you become part of the solution." Marcus looked at Zektar, whose amber eyes held steady faith in whatever decision he would make. He looked at the Covenant Guard, ancient warriors who had maintained their vigil for 10,000 years waiting for this moment. He looked at the entity of living light that embodied the hope and dreams of the long-dead firstborn. And he made his choice. "I accept," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "I accept the inheritance and the responsibility that comes with it." The moment the words left his mouth, everything changed. The warmth in Marcus's blood became a raging fire that flowed through every cell of his body. His vision expanded beyond normal human range, allowing him to see energy patterns and dimensional frequencies that had been invisible moments before. His mind opened to accommodate knowledge that began flowing into it from the crystal and matrices around the chamber. He could suddenly understand the alien symbols on the walls, could feel the history and purpose behind every piece of technology in the sanctum. More than that, he could sense the life forces of every being throughout the station, the fear of the prisoners, the cruel satisfaction of the Kethvar guards, the desperate hope of those who had been fighting for freedom. But, with this expanded awareness came something else: power. Marcus could feel it building within him, responding to his will, ready to reshape reality according to his desires. It was intoxicating and terrifying at the same time. "Easy," Zektar said, placing one of his 4 hands on Marcus's shoulder. "The power of the firstborn is vast, but it must be channeled carefully. Let it flow through you, not consume you." Marcus took a deep breath and tried to center himself. As he did, he became aware of the approaching Kethvar fleet in a way that was almost overwhelming. He could sense their weapons charging, could feel their intent to destroy the sanctum and everyone in it. "They're really going to attack," he said. "Yes," the entity confirmed. "And they have weapons capable of cracking this station open like an egg. The sanctum's defenses can protect this chamber, but the rest of the station and everyone on it will be destroyed." Marcus felt the power within him responding to his emotions, building toward an explosive release. With his new awareness, he could see exactly how to stop the Kethvar fleet. A focused manipulation of gravitational fields could crush their ships, a redirection of their own weapons could turn their firepower against them, a simple alteration of the quantum structure of their hulls could cause them to phase out of normal spacetime. The solutions were elegant, efficient, and absolutely devastating. "No," Marcus said, as much to himself as to anyone else. "That's not the answer." "What do you mean?" asked one of the Covenant Guard. Marcus was still learning to control his expanded senses, but he was beginning to understand something important about the power he had inherited. It wasn't just about having the ability to destroy or reshape reality. It was about choosing when and how to use that power. The firstborn weren't guardians because they were the strongest, Marcus said, the understanding coming to him with crystalline clarity. They were guardians because they knew when not to use their strength. He turned to face the entity, and, for the first time since entering the chamber, Marcus felt truly confident about what needed to happen next. "I'm going to stop this attack," he said. "But I'm not going to do it by destroying the Kethvar fleet. I'm going to show them something they've never seen before, What it looks like when someone with the power to take whatever they want chooses instead to give. The entity's form seemed to brighten. And how do you propose to do that? Marcus smiled, and even he could feel the way that simple expression now carried in weight and authority that could move planets. I'm going to give them exactly what they think they want, he said. And, in doing so, I'm going to show them what they actually need. Before anyone could ask what he meant, Marcus stepped toward the chamber's central platform and began to glow with the same inner light that flowed through the sanctum's ancient technology. The awakening was complete, and the galaxy was about to meet its newest guardian. The Kethvar Empire was about to learn why the Firstborn had chosen humanity as their inheritors, and why sometimes the most powerful weapon in the universe is the willingness to show mercy to those who least deserve it. Marcus stood at the center of the sanctum as energy flowed through him like liquid starlight. With his newly awakened senses, he could perceive the Kethvar fleet approaching with weapons charged and shields raised, ready to reduce the ancient station to cosmic dust. More importantly, he could feel the terror of thousands of innocent beings throughout the Bloodspire arena who had no idea that their lives hung in the balance of decisions being made far above their heads. The power of the Firstborn sang in his veins, offering him a dozen ways to stop the attack. He could reach out with his mind and simply switch off the enemy ship's power systems. He could create a gravitational anomaly that would pull the entire fleet into a harmless but inescapable orbit around a nearby star. He could even reach across space and time to show the Kethvar commanders the consequences of their actions before they happened. But Marcus had meant what he said about understanding the true nature of guardianship. The Firstborn hadn't ruled the galaxy through force. They had guided it through wisdom, protected it through sacrifice, and inspired it through example. Zektar, Marcus said, his voice now carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequency of reality itself. Tell me about the Kethvar. Not what they do, but who they are beneath all the conquest and cruelty. The Korthani warrior's forearms moved in a gesture that Marcus somehow understood expressed deep thought and consideration. They were not always as they are now, Zektar said slowly. My people's historians remember when the Kethvar were a proud warrior culture, but one bound by honor and duty to protect those weaker than themselves. What changed them? The same thing that has corrupted many species in this galaxy. They discovered that strength without wisdom leads inevitably to tyranny. They began to believe that their military superiority gave them the right to rule others, and, from there it was a short step to believing that might truly does make right. The entity of living light moved closer to Marcus, its form pulsing with patterns that conveyed urgency. The fleet will be in firing range in moments, it warned. If you intend to act, it must be now. Marcus nodded and extended his consciousness beyond the sanctum, beyond the station, out into the cold vacuum of space where the Kethvar warships cruised in perfect formation. With his enhanced perceptions, he could see inside their hulls, could observe the reptilian warriors preparing for battle with the cold efficiency that had made them masters of dozens of star systems. But he could also see something else, the fear hidden beneath their arrogance, the doubt that gnawed at them in quiet moments when they wondered if their strength would always be enough to protect them from the consequences of their actions. Instead of attacking the fleet, Marcus did something that none of them could have expected. He opened a communication channel to every ship simultaneously, broadcasting not just his voice but his presence, letting them feel the weight of the ancient power that now flowed through him. Warriors of the Kethvar, Marcus said, his words carrying across space with the authority of cosmic law. You have come here to destroy what you do not understand. You believe that by eliminating me, you can prevent the awakening of humanity's inheritance and maintain your empire's dominance over this region of space. He paused, feeling their surprise and growing unease as they realized that their communications were being overridden by something far beyond their technology's ability to block or trace. You are correct that my awakening changes the balance of power in the galaxy, Marcus continued. But you are wrong about what that change means. I could destroy your entire fleet with a thought. I could reach across space and turn your homeworld sun into a supernova. I could erase your empire from existence so completely that history itself would forget you ever existed. In the sanctum, Zektar was watching Marcus with an expression that combined admiration and concern. The Covenant Guard had moved into protective positions around the chamber, ready to defend their new inheritor if the Kethvar managed to penetrate the station's defenses. But Marcus wasn't done with his message to the fleet. However, he said, and his voice now carried a warmth that seemed to cut through the cold of space itself, I will not do any of those things. Instead, I offer you something that your empire has not seen in centuries, mercy. The response from the Kethvar fleet was immediate and predictable. Their commander, a veteran warrior named Garath who had conquered 17 worlds in the name of the Empire, opened his own communication channel. Human, Garath snarled, his words dripping with contempt, you mistake our approach for negotiation. We have not come here to bargain with you. We have come to eliminate a threat to the natural order of things. And, what order is that? Marcus asked gently. The order that places the strong above the weak, the order that has brought peace to dozens of worlds through the simple expedient of eliminating those foolish enough to resist Kethvar rule. Marcus could feel the approaching weapons lock from the fleet, could sense the moment when Garath would give the order to fire. But, instead of preparing to defend himself, Marcus did something that shocked everyone in the sanctum and on the Kethvar ships. He lowered all of the station's shields. Marcus! Zektar called out in alarm, but Marcus raised one hand in a gesture for silence. Commander Garath, Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly to every ship in the fleet, you believe that strength is measured by the willingness to destroy those who oppose you. I believe that true strength is measured by the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We are about to discover which of us is correct. Through his expanded awareness, Marcus could sense the confusion spreading through the Kethvar fleet. They had expected resistance, defiance, perhaps even a counterattack. They had not expected their target to make himself completely vulnerable. Fire, Garath ordered, but Marcus could hear the uncertainty in the commander's voice. The Kethvar opened up with everything they had, particle beams that could vaporize asteroids, quantum torpedoes that could crack planetary crusts, plasma cannons that burned at temperatures rivaling the cores of stars. Enough firepower to destroy a small moon was suddenly focused on the Bloodspire arena. And Marcus caught it all. Not with shields or armor or defensive technology, but with his bare hands and the power of the Firstborn that flowed through him like liquid light. The energy weapons struck him and simply stopped, their destructive force absorbed and transformed into something else entirely. Marcus began to glow brighter as he absorbed more and more of the fleet's attack, his human form becoming a nexus of barely contained cosmic power. In the sanctum around him, the ancient symbols on the walls began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, and the crystalline matrices hummed with harmonies that had not been heard for 10,000 years. Impossible, breathed one of the Covenant Guard. No single being should be able to absorb that much destructive energy. The Firstborn could, the entity replied, its form now shining almost too brightly to look at directly. And Marcus is proving worthy of their legacy. The Kethvar fleet continued firing for nearly 10 minutes, pouring enough energy into their target to sterilize a continent. And, through it all, Marcus stood unmoved, absorbing every joule of destructive force and transforming it into something beautiful and life-giving. When the fleet finally exhausted their ammunition and energy reserves, Marcus was no longer recognizably human in appearance. He had become a being of pure light, a living star that pulsed with the rhythm of creation itself. Now, Marcus said, his voice somehow gentle despite the cosmic forces contained within it, let me show you what true strength looks like. Instead of unleashing the absorbed energy as a weapon, Marcus began to give it away. The first gift went to the station itself. Every damaged system throughout the Bloodspire arena suddenly found itself repaired and upgraded beyond its original specifications. Life support systems that had been failing for years began working at peak efficiency. Artificial gravity generators that had created uneven fields now produced perfect, comfortable conditions throughout every level. The second gift went to the prisoners. Every being held in the fighting pit suddenly found their cell doors opening, their shackles falling away, their wounds healing as waves of restorative energy washed over them. Not just the current prisoners, but everyone who had ever been harmed in the arena. Marcus reached across time itself to undo years of suffering and brutality. The third gift went to the Kethvar fleet itself. Marcus could sense the growing amazement and fear among the enemy crews as their ships began to change. Not in any threatening way, but in ways that made them better. Their engines became more efficient, their life support systems more comfortable, their weapons more accurate and their shields stronger. But, the most important change was invisible to their instruments. Marcus was healing something deeper than damaged technology. He was reaching into the genetic structure of the HFY themselves and repairing the damage that centuries of violence and conquest had done to their souls. On the flagship, Commander Garath staggered as memories flooded back to him, memories of what his people had been before they became conquerors, memories of the honor codes they had abandoned, the protective instincts they had perverted into aggression. "What is happening to us?" one of his officers asked, his scaled hands shaking as he tried to understand the emotions flooding through him. "We are being shown who we used to be," Garath replied, his voice thick with an emotion he had not felt in decades: shame. Throughout the fleet, the same transformation was taking place. Warriors who had spent lifetimes crushing the weak suddenly remembered what it felt like to want to protect the innocent. Soldiers who had gloried in conquest found themselves weeping for the civilizations they had destroyed. But Marcus wasn't finished. The fourth gift was knowledge. He reached out with his mind and gently touched every consciousness in the fleet, sharing with them not threats or punishment, but understanding. He showed them the true history of the galaxy, the legacy of the firstborn, the interconnected nature of all life. He helped them see that every world they had conquered, every species they had enslaved, was part of a vast cosmic family of which they were also members. And, finally, Marcus offered them the greatest gift of all, choice. "Warriors of the HFY," he said, his voice now coming from everywhere at once as his consciousness expanded to fill the space between stars, "you have seen what I am capable of. You have felt the power that could unmake your empire in moments. But, I do not wish to be your destroyer. I wish to be your teacher." The light around Marcus began to dim as he slowly returned to something approaching human form, though the power of the firstborn still flowed through him like a river of stars. "Your empire was built on the belief that the strong have the right to rule the weak," Marcus continued. "But, true strength does not come from the ability to destroy or conquer. True strength comes from the choice to protect and nurture. True strength comes from love." In the silence that followed, Marcus could feel the weight of decisions settling over the HFY fleet. Some among them wanted to reject what they had experienced, to return to the familiar brutality of conquest. But others, including Commander Garath himself, were beginning to understand that they had been offered something precious beyond measure, the chance to become worthy of the power they wielded. "What would you have us do?" Garath asked finally, his voice transmitted across the space between them with a humility that would have been unthinkable an hour before. Marcus smiled, and his smile contained all the warmth of a sun rising over a peaceful world. "I would have you remember," he said. "Remember who you were before fear turned your strength into cruelty. Remember the honor codes your ancestors followed. Remember that every species in this galaxy, including humanity, is stronger when we work together rather than against each other." He paused, looking out through the transparent walls of the sanctum at the stars beyond. "And, then, I would have you choose for yourselves who you want to be going forward. Not because I command it, not because you fear my power, but because you understand that there is a better way to live than in endless conflict." The transformation of Marcus Chen from simple cargo hauler to galactic guardian was almost complete. But, as he stood surrounded by ancient technology and impossible power, he realized that the most important changes were not happening to him. They were happening to everyone around him, as being after being began to understand that mercy was not weakness, that compassion was not surrender, and that sometimes the most powerful thing anyone could do was to offer love to those who least expected it. The galaxy was about to change forever, and it would begin with a single HFY commander making the choice to try to be better than he had been. 3 months had passed since the Blood Spire Awakening, as historians were already calling it, and the galaxy was discovering just how profoundly one human's act of compassion could reshape the fundamental nature of interstellar civilization. Marcus stood on the observation deck of the newly christened Harmony's Edge, a ship that had grown from the merger of his old cargo hauler and firstborn technology that seemed to respond to his intentions as much as his commands. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, he watched as construction crews from a dozen different species worked together to transform the former Blood Spire Arena into something unprecedented, a center for galactic healing and reconciliation. The changes were visible everywhere. Where once there had been fighting pits filled with blood and sand, now there were meditation gardens where beings from across the galaxy came to find peace. Where torture chambers had once housed the broken spirits of captives, there were now counseling centers where former slaves learned to trust in freedom again. Where the Kethvar had once staged gladiatorial combats for their entertainment, there were now cultural exchange centers where different species shared their arts, sciences, and philosophies. The transformation continues to accelerate, reported Zektar, entering the observation deck with data tablets clutched in his forearms. The Korthani warrior had become Marcus's closest advisor and friend, his loyalty born not from the ancient blood debt but from genuine respect and affection. "Show me," Marcus said, accepting one of the tablets. The data was remarkable. Across the former Kethvar Empire, worlds that had been brutally conquered were now voluntarily joining what was being called the Covenant of Worlds, a new form of galactic government based on cooperation rather than domination. Former slave species were not only regaining their freedom but were actively participating in the rehabilitation of their former oppressors. Most surprising of all, the Kethvar themselves were leading many of these efforts. "Commander Garatha's latest report," Zektar said, handing over another tablet. "His transformation has been remarkable, even by the standards we have come to expect." Marcus read through Garatha's personal log with amazement. The Kethvar commander who had once gloried in conquest was now leading humanitarian missions to worlds damaged by his own previous campaigns. More than that, he was using his military expertise to develop new forms of planetary defense that protected worlds without threatening their neighbors. He has requested permission to establish a redemption corps, Zektar continued. Former Kethvar military units that wish to make amends for their past actions by dedicating their lives to protecting the innocent and helping those they once oppressed. "Permission granted," Marcus said without hesitation. "But I want safeguards in place. Good intentions aren't always enough to overcome centuries of learned behavior." "Already arranged," Zektar replied. "Each Redemption Corps unit will include advisors from species they previously conquered, as well as Covenant Guard observers. The transformation is genuine, but you are wise to ensure it remains so." Marcus set down the tablets and moved to the viewport, watching as a group of children from various species played together in what had once been an execution chamber. Their laughter carried through the ship's audio pickups, a sound that would have been impossible in this place just months before. "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing," Marcus said quietly. Zektar's amber eyes widened in surprise. "How can you doubt that? Look around you. Look at what has been accomplished." "That's exactly what worries me," Marcus replied. "I used the power of the firstborn to change people at the genetic level, to alter their fundamental nature. That's not guidance or inspiration, that's forced evolution. Did I save the galaxy from the Kethvar Empire, or did I simply replace one form of tyranny with another?" Before Zektar could answer, the ship's communication system activated, bringing with it a familiar voice that still carried harmonics of cosmic authority. "Your concerns honor the legacy of the firstborn," said the entity that had overseen Marcus's awakening. "But you underestimate what you actually accomplished." The entity materialized on the observation deck, its form of flowing light somehow managing to convey both ancient wisdom and patient understanding. "I did not guide their transformation," Marcus said. "I forced it. I reached into their minds and changed who they were." "No," the entity replied firmly. "You revealed who they already were. The capacity for honor, compassion, and redemption already existed within the Kethvar, just as it exists within all sentient species. The power of the firstborn cannot create traits that are not already present, it can only remove the barriers that prevent those traits from manifesting." Zektar nodded thoughtfully. "This explains much. I have observed the changed Kethvar closely, and their transformation feels genuine rather than imposed. They are not acting against their nature, they are acting according to a nature they had forgotten they possessed. The firstborn learned this truth millions of years ago," the entity continued. "True guardianship does not come from controlling others or forcing them to be good. It comes from helping them remember their capacity for goodness and giving them the tools they need to choose it for themselves." Marcus considered this as he watched the children playing below. It was true that the Kethvar's transformation had seemed to come from within them rather than being imposed from outside. They were not following his commands or acting out of fear of his power. They were genuinely choosing to be better than they had been. But, the responsibility is still enormous, Marcus said. Every decision I make now affects billions of lives across dozens of star systems. Yes, the entity agreed. And, that is why you were chosen as the inheritor. Not because you wanted power, but because you understood its weight. Not because you sought to rule, but because you were willing to sacrifice for others. The communication system activated again, bringing with it a priority message from Earth. Marcus's heart raced as he recognized the transmission codes from humanity's home system. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Force," came the voice, and Marcus started with surprise at hearing his own surname. "To the being known as Marcus Chen, who claims to be human, Earth demands an explanation for your actions in the galactic community. Your unauthorized negotiations with alien powers have caused considerable diplomatic complications, and Earth requires your immediate return for debriefing." Marcus sank into a nearby chair, the weight of responsibility suddenly feeling heavier than ever. In all his focus on transforming the former Kethvar Empire, he had not considered how his actions would be perceived by his own species. "They think I've gone rogue," he said. "They don't understand what's happening out here." "Can you blame them?" Zektar asked gently. From Earth's perspective, one of their citizens has suddenly appeared as a major player in galactic politics, claiming powers and authority they have no context for understanding. The entity moved closer to Marcus, its form pulsing with what might have been sympathy. "This was always going to be the most difficult part of your awakening," it said. "Humanity as a whole is not ready to understand what you have become. They still think in terms of national governments and territorial sovereignty. The concept of cosmic guardianship is beyond their current comprehension." "Then, maybe I should go back," Marcus said. "Explain what's happened, help them understand." "And risk losing everything we have accomplished here?" Zektar asked. "The Covenant of Worlds is still fragile. The transformation of the Kethvar is ongoing. If you leave now, there is no guarantee that the changes will hold without your presence to guide them." Marcus looked between his friend and the entity, feeling torn between his loyalty to humanity and his responsibility to the galaxy. The power of the Firstborn gave him the ability to be in multiple places at once, to split his consciousness across vast distances, but that would mean dividing his attention at a critical moment when unity of purpose was essential. "There is another option," the entity said slowly. "You could accelerate humanity's development, share with them the knowledge and understanding necessary to comprehend your role as a galactic guardian. Force their evolution the same way I did with the Kethvar?" Marcus shook his head. "No. If my actions were justified because I was revealing existing capacity rather than creating new traits, then humanity should be allowed to develop that understanding naturally. That could take centuries," Zektar pointed out. "And, in the meantime, the galaxy needs guidance." Marcus stood and walked back to the viewport, watching the ongoing transformation of the former arena. An idea was beginning to form, one that honored both his responsibilities as a guardian and his loyalty to his own species. "I'm going to Earth," he said finally. "But not to be debriefed or to submit to their authority. I'm going to make them an offer." "What kind of offer?" the entity asked. Marcus turned back to face them, and both Zektar and the entity could see that he had made a decision that felt right to him at the deepest level. "I'm going to offer to teach them," Marcus said. "Not by forcing evolution or sharing cosmic secrets, but by giving them the opportunity to learn through experience. I want to invite Earth to join the Covenant of Worlds as an equal partner." "That is remarkably risky," Zektar observed. "Humanity is still a young species, prone to conflict and territorial thinking. They might try to exploit their connection to you for advantage over other species." "They might," Marcus agreed. "But they might also surprise us. And, besides, they're my people. If I'm going to be a guardian for the galaxy, I need to start by having faith in the species that produced me." The entity's form brightened considerably. "Now you begin to truly understand the legacy of the Firstborn. They did not rule the galaxy through fear or force. They guided it by setting an example of what was possible and trusting other species to choose to follow that example." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of rightness settle over him. He had spent months learning to use the power of the firstborn, but only now was he beginning to understand the wisdom that should guide that power. "Prepare the ship for Earth," he told Zektar. "And send a message to Admiral Chen. Tell her that I'm coming home, not as a rogue agent seeking forgiveness, but as humanity's representative to the galactic community, coming to offer them a chance to take their place among the stars as partners rather than subjects." As the Harmony's Edge began preparing for the journey to Earth, Marcus continued watching the children play in the transformed arena. Soon, if everything went according to his hopes, there might be human children among them, learning to see the universe not as a collection of potential enemies or resources to exploit, but as a vast family to which they belonged. The real test of his worthiness as an inheritor was about to begin, not in controlling alien empires or wielding cosmic power, but in trusting his own species to choose wisely when offered the chance to be part of something greater than themselves. The galaxy waited to see what choice humanity would make. The Harmony's Edge dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and Marcus felt his heart tighten as Earth came into view on the main display. It looked exactly as he remembered, a blue marble swirled with white clouds, hanging in the cosmic void like a precious jewel. But his enhanced senses could now perceive so much more than his human eyes had ever shown him. He could feel the life force of every human on the planet's surface, all 8 billion souls going about their daily lives unaware that one of their own had become something unprecedented in galactic history. He could sense the orbital defense platforms that Admiral Chen had positioned throughout the system, their weapons trained on his ship with precision born of fear and uncertainty. "Impressive," Zektar observed, studying the tactical displays. "For such a young spacefaring civilization, humanity has developed remarkably effective defensive capabilities." Marcus smiled with a mixture of pride and sadness. "My people have always been good at preparing for war. It's peace we've struggled with." The communication system activated, bringing with it Admiral Chen's voice, though this time it carried the authority of someone speaking from a position of strength rather than confusion. "Unidentified vessel, you are ordered to maintain your current position and submit to boarding by Earth Defense Force personnel. Any attempt to approach Earth or the inner system will be met with immediate military response." "Admiral," Marcus replied, opening a channel, "this is Marcus Chen aboard the Harmony's Edge. I'm requesting permission to approach Earth for diplomatic discussions, not as a subject returning for discipline, but as humanity's representative to the galactic community." There was a long pause before Admiral Chen responded, and, when she did, Marcus could hear the strain in her voice. "Marcus Chen, you are accused of unauthorized contact with alien civilizations, of making commitments on behalf of humanity without proper authority, and of claims to power and status that no individual human has the right to make. You will submit to immediate arrest and debriefing." "I'm afraid that's not possible, Admiral," Marcus said gently. "But I would be happy to meet with Earth's leaders to explain what has happened and to extend an invitation that I believe will transform humanity's future among the stars." "You are one man with one ship," Admiral Chen replied, her voice growing harder. "You are surrounded by the entire Earth Defense Force. You will submit to our authority or face the consequences." Marcus felt the targeting systems of 24 warships lock onto his vessel, and, through his enhanced senses, he could feel the tension and fear of the human crews manning those weapons. They were preparing to fire on one of their own because they couldn't understand what he had become. The entity materialized on the bridge beside him, its form dimmed to avoid startling Zektar with its brilliance. "This is the choice every inheritor faces," it said quietly. "Do you force understanding, or do you trust in the capacity for growth that exists within your species?" Marcus looked at the tactical display showing the hostile formation surrounding him, then at Earth hanging peacefully in the void, then at his four-armed friend whose life he had saved with a simple act of compassion months ago. "I trust them," he said finally. "Even when they point guns at me, I trust them." Instead of raising shields or powering weapons, Marcus did something that shocked everyone monitoring the situation. He transmitted the complete technical specifications of his ship to the Earth Defense Force, showing them exactly how advanced his vessel was and how easily it could destroy their entire fleet. "Admiral Chen," Marcus said calmly, "my ship is equipped with technology that could vaporize your entire fleet in seconds, or disable it without harming a single crew member, or simply disappear from your sensors as if it had never been here. I am sharing these technical specifications with you so that you understand I am not here as a threat or as a fugitive." He paused, letting that information sink in before continuing. I am here as someone who has been given remarkable gifts and remarkable responsibilities, and who wants to share both with the species that raised me. Will you listen to what I have to offer? The silence stretched for nearly 5 minutes before Admiral Chen responded, and, when she did, her voice carried a mixture of awe and wariness. The technology you have shared appears to be centuries ahead of our current capabilities, she said. Perhaps millennia. Where did you acquire such advanced systems? That's a long story, Marcus replied. But, the short version is that I helped an injured alien warrior, and it triggered something that had been dormant in human genetics for thousands of years. I learned that humanity was chosen long ago to inherit the guardianship of this galaxy, and I have spent the past months learning what that means. Guardianship of the galaxy? Admiral Chen's voice cracked slightly. That's an extraordinary claim, Marcus. I know it is. And I know how it sounds. But, Admiral, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to let me show you what's possible. Will you meet with me? Will you listen to what I have to offer before you decide whether I'm a threat or an opportunity? Another long pause, then, very well. But, you will come aboard my flagship alone and unarmed. Any sign of deception or threat, and this conversation ends. Marcus stood and straightened his simple civilian clothing. After months of wielding cosmic power, he was still most comfortable in the cargo hauler's outfit he had been wearing when this all began. Alone and unarmed, he agreed. I'll transport over to your ship immediately. Transport over? Admiral Chen asked. Marcus smiled and simply stepped forward, his form dissolving into light as the power of the Firstborn carried him across space instantaneously. He rematerialized on the bridge of the EDF flagship Endeavour, where Admiral Chen and her senior staff were staring at him with expressions ranging from amazement to terror. Admiral Sarah Chen was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She was also, Marcus realized with a start, his cousin Sarah, whom he hadn't seen since their grandfather's funeral 15 years ago. Hello, Sarah, he said gently. It's good to see you again. Marcus, she replied, her voice carefully controlled. You look different. Marcus nodded, aware that his appearance had changed significantly since his awakening. He was still recognizably human, but there was something about him now that spoke of depths and powers beyond mortal understanding. I am different, he admitted. But I'm still the boy who used to build model starships in Grandpa's garage and dream about exploring the galaxy. That boy never claimed to be the guardian of galactic civilization, Sarah pointed out. No, but he dreamed of a future where humanity would take its place among the stars as explorers and protectors rather than conquerors. Marcus moved to the bridge's main display, which showed Earth hanging in space beyond the viewport. Sarah, what I'm about to show you will challenge everything you think you know about humanity's place in the universe. Are you ready for that? Instead of answering directly, Sarah gestured to her communications officer. Record everything. Full sensor sweep, complete documentation. Marcus nodded approvingly. Good. The galaxy's leaders should have proof of what I'm about to offer. He raised his hand, and the bridge display suddenly came alive with information that should have been impossible for them to access, real-time data from across the galaxy, showing the current state of dozens of star systems, the activities of hundreds of alien civilizations, the vast network of trade and diplomacy that connected thousands of worlds. This is the galactic community as it exists today, Marcus said, his voice taking on harmonics that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequency of reality itself. Over 3,000 spacefaring civilizations, connected by trade routes and communication networks that span the entire galaxy. And, for the most part, humanity knows nothing about any of it. The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the displays showed alien cities that made human metropolises look primitive, space stations the size of moons, fleets of vessels that dwarfed Earth's entire space-based infrastructure. We're not alone, whispered one of the junior officers. We're not even close to alone. No, Marcus agreed. And, until recently, most of these civilizations saw humanity as too young and too aggressive to be trusted with full membership in the galactic community. They were content to let us develop in isolation until we either matured or destroyed ourselves. Sarah studied the displays with the tactical mind that had made her the youngest admiral in EDF history. But something changed. Your awakening, the inheritance you mentioned. Marcus nodded and waved his hand again. The displays shifted to show the recent transformation of the former Kethvar Empire, the establishment of the Covenant of Worlds, the ongoing rehabilitation of former conquerors into protectors and healers. 3 months ago, I helped an injured alien gladiator, Marcus said quietly. That act of compassion triggered the awakening of genetic markers that had been dormant in humanity for 10,000 years. I learned that we are the inheritors of an ancient race called the Firstborn, who served as guardians of galactic civilization before transcending to higher dimensions. He turned to face Sarah directly, and she could see in his eyes the weight of responsibility that had settled on him. The power I inherited could have made me a conqueror, could have let me rule the galaxy through force. Instead, it taught me that true strength comes from the choice to serve others rather than to dominate them. And, Sarah, it showed me that this capacity for selfless service isn't unique to me. It exists in all humans. What are you saying? Sarah asked, though Marcus could see in her eyes that she was beginning to understand. I'm saying that the genetic potential for cosmic guardianship doesn't just exist in me. It exists in every human being. The awakening I experienced could theoretically happen to any of us under the right circumstances. Marcus gestured to the bridge crew around them. Every person in this room, every human on Earth, carries the sleeping heritage of the Firstborn. The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. If Marcus was telling the truth, then humanity wasn't just another young species struggling to find its place among the stars. They were the genetic inheritors of the galaxy's greatest guardians. But that's not even the most important thing I came to tell you, Marcus continued. The most important thing is this: the galaxy wants to welcome humanity as full partners in the cosmic community. The Covenant of Worlds has voted unanimously to invite Earth to join as a founding member of the new galactic government. Sarah sat down heavily in her command chair. You're offering us membership in a galactic government? I'm offering you so much more than that, Marcus said, his voice carrying all the warmth and love he felt for his species. I'm offering you the chance to be part of something greater than any single world or species. I'm offering you access to technologies that could solve every problem Earth faces: clean energy, environmental restoration, medical advances that could extend human life for centuries. He paused, looking around at the stunned faces of the bridge crew. But, more than that, I'm offering you the chance to be what I know humanity can be, not conquerors or exploiters, but explorers and protectors. The chance to use our natural compassion and determination not to dominate others, but to help them flourish. Sarah was quiet for a long time, studying the displays that showed the vast scope of galactic civilization. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone making a decision that would shape the future of her species. What would membership in this covenant require of us? She asked. Partnership, Marcus replied simply. The same thing it requires of every member species: a commitment to the principles of mutual aid, peaceful resolution of conflicts, and protection of those who cannot protect themselves. No species is required to give up its independence or unique culture. But all members agree to work together for the common good. And if Earth refuses? Marcus's expression grew sad but understanding. Then, humanity continues to develop in isolation, and I continue to serve as your species' representative to the galactic community whether you acknowledge that role or not. The invitation will remain open for as long as you need to consider it. Sarah looked around at her bridge crew, seeing her own mixture of amazement and uncertainty reflected in their faces. This was the kind of decision that should involve Earth's entire government structure, lengthy debates in the UN, careful analysis by experts in dozens of fields. But it was also the kind of opportunity that might never come again. Marcus, she said finally, I need to speak with the Secretary General, with the major world leaders, with our best scientists and philosophers. This decision cannot be made by one person. Marcus smiled, and his smile contained all the patience of cosmic time. Of course. Take all the time you need. The galaxy has waited 10,000 years for humanity to take its place among the stars. We can wait a little longer. He began to dissolve back into light, preparing to return to his ship. But, before he completely disappeared, he spoke one more time. Sarah, tell them this: the choice isn't really about joining a galactic government or gaining access to advanced technology. The choice is about who we want to be as a species. Do we want to be a young civilization struggling alone in the dark, or do we want to be partners in lighting up the entire galaxy with hope? As Marcus disappeared, leaving behind only the echo of cosmic power and impossible possibilities, Admiral Sarah Chen stared at the display showing thousands of alien worlds and felt the weight of humanity's future settling on her shoulders. The boy who had once dreamed of exploring the stars had returned as their guardian, offering his people the chance to join him in protecting and nurturing life throughout the cosmos. Now it remained to be seen whether humanity was ready to accept the responsibility that came.